Are you tired of self-doubt holding you back? Have you ever wished you could have the confidence to face your fears, go after your wildest dreams, and the tools necessary to live your best life? Hey there, amazing listeners. I'm your host and author of How to Grasp Confidence and Own Your Power. And I've made it my mission to help you break free from self-doubt and embrace confidence. Subscribe now and join us as we unlock the secrets to unshakable self-assurance. Let's dive in. Scott Anderson is the author of You're Not Toast and the founder of DoubleDare, a business coaching service helping high-achieving professionals break free from burnout. Ooh, that is so needed these days. With 30 years of business ownership, an ICF certification, and mental health therapy credentials, Scott guides his clients through a proven process to reduce stress, scale businesses, so important, and rediscover work passion. I love that. His approach blends business strategy with a deep understanding of burnout's mental and emotional dimensions. I love it. Scott, welcome to the show today, my friend.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah. So, we hear this word a lot, burnout, and
Yes.
talk to a lot of doctors. I have a lot of doctors who are clients and friends of mine. And, I hear it in the health care industry the most. I will say that. But it's really prevalent across industries, across countries, across continents,
It
languages.
is.
I mean, I was in the corporate world. I can't speak for everyone. I got burnt out. I know what it feels like. It's
Yeah.
scary.
It really is. It really is. And, the scope of burnout isn't that well known. And we certainly, the term burnout was coined by some social scientists in the 70s. And they were talking about passion burning out in emergency room doctors and nurses. And that's where the term was coined, that folks under stress over a long period without any relief, that their passion burned out. And that was where they came up with the term. Since then, that was 50 years ago. And since then, there's been all kinds of research. And today, the World Health Organization has designated burnout as an epidemic affecting 40% of the working population. And, it probably affects a lot more people than that. But yeah, it's probably the most common problem and behavioral sort of physical ailment that there is.
And was it always this way? I mean, I know that, there's always been a certain amount of work stress. And I know as a human being, we're geared toward fight or flight, right? These
Right.
emotional, physical, physiological reactions happen inside of our brains and bodies to protect us. And,
Right.
from an ancestral perspective, they protected us from the big saber-toothed tiger.
Exactly.
But Scott, the saber-toothed tiger doesn't exist anymore.
That's right.
We're not running from a predator, but it feels like it on the inside.
Exactly. Well, that's a great question. I mean, what happened is that the instance of burnout in the workplace has been documented by lots of people, but especially the Gallup people in Omaha, Nebraska, where I'm from. And every year they document they measure and publish a study on the engagement rate in corporations and also the burnout rate. And it's gone steadily up really since the 80s. But the 80s was an inflection point. The Great Recession of 80 in the 80s. Well, first the 16% interest rates in the 80s, and then ultimately that started kind of the dramatic increase. And since 2008 in particular, in the Great Recession, it's really taken off. It went way up during COVID, but it has not come down. If we're past COVID, I don't know if we ever will be, but it hasn't come down. That's a concern, I think, to social scientists and doctors, and also it should be to employers as well as to their employees.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Again, it's across industries. It's just you hear it everywhere now. I do believe healthcare workers have it a lot different than the rest of us, you know?
Mhm.
They have a different level of stress in a lot of ways, than I can even imagine, but it's still, again, I think we're naturally geared toward, like, this fight or flight kind of thing.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
and it's not easy because, again, when I was in my burnout period, it takes a long time to heal, Scott. And then you're thinking, I need time to heal, but some people are again in that place of survival mode where they need to get another job right now,
Yeah.
but then you're burnt out.
Well, that's the whole, that's exactly the problem is that, the number one symptom, according to the World Health Organization, and definitely in my experience, the number one symptom that people actually notice is physical exhaustion. And this was my experience. We were talking about our heroes' journeys. I'm not sure it's as heroic as that, but it was certainly a journey and hard. But in my own experience, what most people notice is a kind of bone weary fatigue, so
Mm.
that you go to bed at night thinking you're going to wake up refreshed the next morning, but you don't. You wake up as exhausted as when you went to bed. And the concern is that I went through this myself, this sort of, quiet desperation, I guess, was the waking up in the morning thinking, I was running a business. I've always run companies, and I knew that I had to get up. There was no one else who was going to do that for me. I had to get up and lead this business, and but I was in real fear that I couldn't do it. That the exhaustion and the really bone weary, overwhelming fatigue would make it impossible one day, and one day I wouldn't be able to answer the bell. And that's what really scared me the most, I guess, was just that sense that I'm in a place now that I don't know how to get out of because, like most burned out people, my mo, my go to strategy is to work harder and worry more, and and that's unfortunately the path to burnout. It's not the path to recovery, but if those are the coping skills that most of us have, and the more high achievement you tend to be, the worse it gets. What I've noticed is that people who are very successful but also highly burned out tend to be perfectionistic, and they tend to take on more than they should. They tend to have bad boundaries. These are sweeping generalizations, but they're uber responsible people, and this in American business can lead to big success, both as an employee and as a business owner. The problem is that ultimately, and this comes a lot in small business for business owners who can't or won't scale their companies, they get to a point where their success is literally killing them. And the old plays that they've run forever to work harder and worry more are actually going to kill them. It almost killed me. Um, and so, but that's the trap because it feels like this used to work. Why isn't this working? My magic wand is pooped out, I guess. And why am I? And I'm so exhausted right now that I can't work any harder anymore. And if that isn't working, then what am I going to do? Really, I mean, it hits kind of an existential point for people. It certainly did for me.
Wow. Are you reading my mind? You're like describing me, right? I'm like, yep, worries a lot. Yep, check that box, check that
Yeah.
box. Right?
Well, the problem is it really works, and these superpowers are wonderful until they turn to kryptonite,
Mm.
and that's what happened to me. Is that that really worked for 20 years. It worked. I started a bunch of businesses. At the peak of my burnout, I was running an advertising agency with my partners that I'd been in business. I've been in that owned that agency for 20 years. Things were good. It wasn't that things were bad. But I just got to a point where, I kept thinking, well, I'll take a long weekend or a vacation. That ought to help, right? And I've actually had clients who have taken sabbaticals of 30 days, 60 days. I had one client in Poland who took a 6 month sabbatical thinking that that will help. But unfortunately, it doesn't. If anything, it makes it worse. And
Wow.
this particular client from Krakow, Poland, was 6 months into her sabbatical, and she realized, oh my God, I'm worse off really than I was. And now I have to go back to work. So all of the things that are intuitive to solve the burnout, in fact, not only don't help, but almost always make it worse.
This is like counterintuitive
It
to
is.
exactly the approach I, well, have taken, right?
Yeah.
Or would take, I would think, if I was to go through something again, is to you say, as one of my friends says, everything works better when it's unplugged for a little while. So that's
Yes.
the
Yeah.
typical advice.
Sure.
Why doesn't it work? I'm fascinated by this because, again, it's so contrarian to everything that I've heard and told myself, of course.
Yes. Well, and I did exactly the same thing. I mean, I assumed, yes, unplug. That must be the answer, or a variety of different answers that we typically try. For most of us, it typically does though come back to our superpowers, and we figure I'll take a break, but then I'll have the energy to come back and work hard and worry more. The problem really is in our thinking.
Mm.
I say to people often, and it's not always popular, that they're causing their own burnout,
Yeah.
and that's I say that with deep compassion, and I've been through it myself. But it's actually good news, because if I had to wait for my customers, my employees, the economy, et cetera, to change somehow so that I wasn't so stressed out, it would be a long wait if I had to wait for them. So if the problem is me and inside of me, not as a source of shame or fault or any of that, but if I'm causing my own burnout, that means that I can turn things around. And I can also, it turns out, turn things around a lot more quickly than I thought. For our clients, 90 days is the prescription. And often they're feeling significantly better, much faster. But the approach is, as you say, very counterintuitive. We tend to cause our own burnout because, let's take unplugging, for example. The science around about burnout, and there's a sociologist at UCal Berkeley named Christina Maslach, who created the Maslach Burnout Inventory. And she's the one that we've really studied and has coined the term burnout and is a total genius. One of the things that she and her researchers discovered is that it's true we need to unplug, but we need to unplug in a very different way than a sabbatical or a long weekend or even a good night's sleep. Um, our minds, bodies, and spirits, and our cortisol and stress systems need to recover multiple times a day for brief periods. That's the science of recovery.
Mm.
And what we really, one of the things that's very counterintuitive is to face the fact that we're stressed or overwhelmed and to briefly experience it, at least to notice that we're overwhelmed. But the science of burnout recovery starts with people realizing that, first of all, to be able to notice and actually feel overwhelm is the beginning of the solution. But what we tend to do as overachievers is rub dirt on it or try to ignore it or work through it, because we're afraid if I slowed down, we'd be overcome by it. But the science of burnout recovery says if you can take 5 or 10 mini vacations a day for only 5 or 10 seconds each, your recovery from burnout can happen. But it's very much like the Olympic athlete who trains but puts as much emphasis on recovery as they do on training, and so that to avoid tearing muscles for every hour of workout, there's an hour at least of recovery and stretching and nutrition and hydration. And it's very similar for us as workplace athletes. But what we need to do is frequent recovery and stretching mentally and nutrition and hydration and all the rest of it. But so, for example, we have a technique that we offer in our program, and I'd be happy to send this to anybody who's interested, called the R&R technique, which is it's a 10-second or less technique for people who are too busy to meditate, although we highly recommend it. But just to take a 10-second break, and the key to it is to notice when you're feeling overwhelmed and not to roll around in it. The fear is always, if I focus on it, then I'll be overwhelmed by it and I'll never be able to get out of it. I'll just sort of wallow in it. But the answer really is just to notice physically, what am I feeling physically in this moment? And for most of us, there is some sort of a disturbance between the neck and the navel, some sort of a disturbance, typically a twinge, a pain, a throbbing, a heat, a coolness. There's something. And if we could just notice it briefly, breathe in through our nose and breathe out through our mouth and visualize the tension, the physical tension leaving. As simple as that sounds, that's all I had in the beginning. It was very counterintuitive. The whole idea of stopping is so counterintuitive. To stop for even 10 seconds, was counterintuitive. But that's what really helped me. And so by taking these mini vacations, as often as you notice feeling at first overwhelmed and ultimately just tense, that's really the way that we can recover. But again, we don't want to look at it. But it's the science. What we tend to do is either avoid or over engage. We fight or flee, and both will compound our burnout. Which is why vacations, they sound right. It sounds like that would help, and it isn't that they can't help. But if we don't also engage with what we're feeling, even briefly, even only for 5 or 10 seconds, we can't recover because our brains are so smart, they know we're avoiding it. If we take a 10-week vacation to Tahiti or whatever, if our motivation is avoiding the way that we're feeling, we're never going to recover. We may have a nice vacation, but we'll come back to work and it'll ramp up again really fast.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I really, truly never thought of it that way, but now that you mention it, I have actually experienced that, right? Where you take a vacation, a sabbatical, something like that, and then think it's going to set you off on the right foot, but you didn't change your thinking. And you said
Right.
that, at the beginning, you have to change that thinking, and you're 100% right. Part of it is patterns. If
Yes.
you're a ruminating thinker and you're the record player, as I say, right? We're just
Yes.
playing in a loop. Here we go again. If you don't change that pattern and break that pattern of ruminating negative thoughts, which most of us have,
Right.
right? Most of us have negative. If you we think negatively a majority percent of the time in general as human beings, but then a certain percentage of that too is those negative ruminating thoughts. And I agree with you. I think if we don't change our thinking, no matter how much vacation we have, when we come back, we're going to find something to negatively ruminate about, right?
Yeah. And it's happening in the background. I mean, unless we really address it. And again, this isn't about, my fear was I'm going to have to spend years on a psychiatrist's couch. And I am a licensed mental health therapist, so I shouldn't have an aversion to this. But my fear was that I would have to spend hours and hours in therapy. Not that that's a bad thing. It could be a very important thing. But my fear was that if I did that, I might not be able to, it might overwhelm me. If I went too deep into it, if I went into the abyss, as it were, that I might not ever get out of it. And the whole problem, or the biggest problem scientifically with burnout, is avoiding it, and or trying to tell ourselves. It's very much like thinking, don't think about pink elephants, don't think about pink elephants, don't think about pink elephants. But
Right.
it tattoos pink elephants in our minds.
Yeah.
Our minds are object oriented, and so if we don't think about burnout, or don't think about deadlines, or don't think about customers, don't think about the economy, etc., we tattoo those fears in our minds. And so any attempt to avoid what we're going through, and whether that takes the form, ironically, it takes the form of a vacation or sabbatical. Um, we use other much more subtle but almost more insidious ways of escaping and avoiding, whether it's drinking or other substances, shopping, spending. Most of us are, there's some component of eating. Typically, sugar and caffeine is a big, part of all of this. But we find ways of avoiding. The problem is that our brains are so smart, they know we're avoiding. And it very much is, don't think about pink elephants, don't think about pink elephants. And even if you're in Tahiti thinking, don't think of pink elephants, you're making it worse.
Ooh.
So there has to be, pardon me, there has to be a moment where we're willing to look under the bed and, see if there really is a monster under the bed. And it turns out that there's just socks under the bed. But there's that counterintuitive moment where we really have to look and see, and that's when the recovery begins.
So, for someone who's watching this or listening to this podcast right now and they're feeling burnt out, they're feeling at the end of their rope. Maybe they are struggling with depression, lack of confidence, anxiety, ruminating thoughts. They feel like they're in that record
Yeah.
and just going around it again. And when they go to sleep, they wake up the next day and the ruminations already started. How do you break that cycle? Can you give
Yes.
somebody a good piece of action that they could take today that could
Yes,
help them
absolutely.
in their life?
One of the things I found, and was so guilty of this myself, is that we tend to be, especially the higher achievement we are, the harsher the critic we tend to be of ourselves. And so the number one advice I would give you, and this is, again, it's, you really have to hit a wall to even consider advice like this. At least I did. But the number one thing is to try to be gentle with yourself and
Mm.
and patient with yourself. And this is about as counterintuitive as it gets. I mean, it's sort of like the cowboy who's spurring his horse to go faster and faster and faster and faster. That's kind of our go-to move. And the problem is, after a while, the horse is bleeding from being spurred so much, and isn't going to do it. So we have to start by kind of taking the spurs off and realizing, hey, this isn't working. You know, to use another gross horse analogy, it's, if the horse is dead, dismount. I mean, we really have to start from the perspective of, this isn't working. It really isn't. Most of us don't want to look at that, because if this isn't working, we don't have a plan B. But that was what I was, and still so grateful to have discovered, that there is a plan B, and it's much simpler. It's just so counterintuitive that most of us wouldn't consider it. But the first step really is just to be gentle with yourself and give yourself a break a little bit. But spurring yourself with spurs day after day after day after day, even if it worked for years, is not working now. And in fact, it will only make it worse. So that's maybe number one. Number two is, there are some very simple, if counterintuitive, very simple steps that you can start taking today that will turn this around in a remarkably short amount of time. Again, I thought it would take decades on a psychiatrist's couch to get through it. But my own experience was that within a couple of weeks, just using the R&R technique, which is all I had at first. Now we have a complete system. But at the time, that was enough that 2 weeks later, I felt a lot better and began to have hope for the first time. So, I guess that's in our book, You're Not Toast. That's the first line, is there is hope. Because there really is. We've worked with thousands of folks just like me, and maybe like you too, Tara, that got to a point of quiet desperation, with no one to talk to, but had that feeling one more morning, kind of like the Groundhog's Day movie, where the alarm goes off at 6 a.m., Sonny and Cher is playing again, and I'm not sure if I can answer the bell today. If that's you, then there really is hope. But again, it's number one, give yourself a break. Try to be as gentle with yourself as you can. And, one of the things that we like to do, kind of in empathy and in community with fellow sufferers, is we offer a free call, where we try to give folks an immediate bit of kind of a chiropractic adjustment, on a virtually, as we said in the pre-call, there's no bones cracking. This is all virtual, but a 15-minute call where typically preceded by a quick online assessment to understand the specifics of your burnout, but where we can give you at least 2 or 3 plays you can start running right now today, because it really isn't necessary to suffer like this anymore. And if all you do is start with a technique like the R&R and you use it 4 or 5 times a day for 10 seconds at a time, you will begin to turn the corner.
I love that. Wow. It's like the helpline for burnout.
Yes, it's called the Fast Fix Call. And if anybody's interested, it's fastfixcall.com. And it's a free call with either me or one of our coaches. And we will we will give you some plays that you can start running right now. And it really will help. Fastfixcall.com, and we'll help you.
I love that. Do you have any wisdom for people out there that, they're questioning, what is burnt out? Am I burnt out? Maybe they haven't
Yes.
maybe they haven't accepted the fact they're burnt out yet, right?
Well, the first thing we always ask people to do is to see a doctor. And because there are a lot of things that could be going on, and we don't practice medicine. There could be a lot of things going on. And high achievers tend to not go to doctors. This was especially bad during COVID, but it's just the way we tend to be. We rub dirt on it and move on. We want our employees to go to doctors, or we want our coworkers to go to doctors or our loved ones, but we don't. So number one, we always recommend get a complete exam, a checkup, and find out where you are to rule out other things that might be going on. I also want to be the first to say that there are definitely workplace environments that are toxic, that really are toxic. Our experience is that most of the time we cause our own burnout, and we think of that as actually a good thing because, again, if we had to wait for others to change, it'd be a long way. But there are environments that genuinely are toxic or misogynistic or racist or in some other way systematically toxic. And if that's the case, run away screaming. Life is too short. The problem is with burnout is that one of the main symptoms is the feeling that they don't get me. I'm misunderstood. I'm trying so hard, but I'm unappreciated.
Yeah.
And it's them. There's a victim component to burnout that is very tricky to tease out. It can feel as though it's them when it's not them. So that's one of the reasons we like to talk to people on this Fast Fix Call to kind of, we really want to know in triage, is it physical potentially? Is your environment genuinely toxic? It may be. And if it is, we're not suggesting that you should hang in an environment that's systematically bad for you. Our experience, however, is that while that happens, both of those things happen from time to time, and people may have adrenal problems or blood sugar problems or other health problems, and absolutely get that solved. And you may be in a toxic environment. Our experience is that that's not usually the cause. And the problem is that we've had a lot of clients who have quit jobs. We've had a lot of clients who have sold businesses thinking, well, that's the problem. It's them. And only to discover, having quit their job or sold their business, that they're just as burned out as they were before. We've had clients who have gotten divorces, who have ended relationships, who have dramatically changed their lives. But unfortunately, we're aiming at the wrong thing. And that can be a tragedy in itself. So we really want to rule out as many other complicating issues as we can and isolate what's really going on here. But once we do, then it becomes a pretty straightforward process.
My compass for this to determine, and let me know what you think. I'd be curious to get your professional opinion. My compass for this is, does it align with my values?
Yeah, bingo. That's exactly it.
And we did not go over that beforehand.
Yeah. No, that's exactly. And it's a big part of our process is, by the time people get to me or get to our program, they really have lost their compass. It's really about, how do I survive? How do I answer the bell? When the alarm goes off like Groundhog's Day, how do I answer the bell? It's no longer about what's good for me. It's truly survival. And when it reaches that point, values are the last thing that we're looking at. So a big part of our program is to shift our emphasis from what our nervous system is telling us, or what our culture is telling us, or our company is telling us, or our checkbooks are telling us, And instead, a big part of the recovery process, once we've begun to learn some basic skills like the R&R technique, is to pivot to what are your values? Because most of us, a lot of us, have really lost track of that in the service of just trying to stay alive, kind of. We've kind of pushed it all across the table. So absolutely, people need a true north that they can count on and that they can depend on, uh, even when they're feeling very conflicted, when they're feeling very overwhelmed or very exhausted. Um, and when we think about values, at least in our program, it's not about moral values because we'll assume that everybody's a good person. It's not that. It's what makes life to you. What are the things that you must have in your life to feel alive? And then we go through an auditing process, and we find that with most of our clients, their top three values that they've identified, they haven't looked at them and haven't honored them and haven't lived according to them in a long time. So yeah, completely, 110%.
I love that. Wow. So aligned. Well, what a great interview. I know everybody who listens to this is going to get so much great information from this and ultimately help change your life. I do agree. It starts with our thinking. We also have to make sure what we're doing in life aligns with what we believe in. It's our
Yeah,
value.
that's right.
Once you go against the grain, once you start swimming against the current and try to resist, you're going to find a lot more heartache. Trust me.
Yes,
A lot
that's
more
right.
adversity, a lot more. So I encourage anybody who's listening to this right now and feels burnt out, reach out to Scott and his team for this quick burnout method that, it's that virtual chiropractic adjustment to make sure that you know how to step forward. So important. Scott, what a great interview. Where can people find you?
Oh, thanks so much. It's been great to talk to you, Tara. I love your show. I love your book, and the GRASP method is
Thank
so right
you.
on. Um, burnoutbreakthrough.com is the best place for people to go. And or if you want to just really jump ahead, go to fastfixcall.com and schedule a call. But burnoutbreakthrough.com is where you'll find our book. If you want it, You're Not Toast, uh, which lays out the entire system from A to Z, exactly the process that we use with our clients. Or if you'd like the quick chiropractic adjustment, go to fastfixcall.com and we'll try to get you moving again. At least in miniature, we'll do the adjustment and get you headed in the right direction.
I love that. Well, Scott, thank you so much for being a fantastic guest on this show. Thank you for everyone who tuned into this episode of Grasp Confidence Podcast. Guys, don't forget to follow, subscribe, share this episode, and leave a review. I read each and every review personally and love them all. And occasionally, I share them live on the podcast as well. So you're honored forever. We appreciate everyone who tunes in weekly. We will catch you on the next episode. Take care. And that's a wrap for this episode of Grasp Confidence. Thank you for joining me today and investing in yourself. Remember, building confidence is an ongoing journey, and each step you take brings you closer to the empowered, fearless version of yourself that you were born to be. Don't forget to visit my website, follow me on social media, and purchase my book, which is available on Amazon. Thank you for listening. We will see you on the next episode. Stay confident.